You're listening to The Hollow Mare, Book 2 of the Ash of the Veil series. We hope you enjoy your journey. Chapter 1, Moon Banner. The Kös. Steppe stretched like a vast cracked hide under the indifferent sky, its bone-dust soil whispering secrets of the dead to the wind. Yelka Morozova clung to the back of her mare, the beast's flanks slick with sweat and the faint metallic tang of blood from their latest skirmish. The air carried the acrid bite of smoke from distant pyres, where Qing soldiers burned what they could not control. But tonight, under a moon swollen with silver light, hope flickered like a half-drowned flame. Kös Bata rode ahead, his broad shoulders cutting through the night like a blade. The stolen banner trailed from his lance, its silk threads drinking the moonlight greedily, turning the fabric from blood red to a shimmering pearl. It was a Qing war standard, captured in the chaos of their flight from the ossuary, but now it served the resurrection of his people. Or so the spirits whispered to him in his blood-drenched dreams. "Another village ahead," Kös called back, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through Yelka's bones. He didn't turn, but she felt his awareness of her like a tether, pulling taut. "The scouts say it's held by a garrison of 20. We end them quick, or the steppe claims more souls." Yelka nodded, though he couldn't see it, her fingers tightening on the reins. The fern-flower stirred within her, a coiling heat low in her belly, as if sensing the life it might awaken. Since signing his contract with her own blood, she'd become its vessel, the key to the Oirat rebirth, or their final annihilation. Every night, Kös coaxed its buds open with touch and hunger, their bodies a battlefield of pleasure and peril. And now, with the banner, they brought that power to the villages, freeing them from the Empire's chokehold. They crested a low rise, the village unfolding below like a cluster of bruised petals. Yurts huddled against the wind, corrals of skeletal horses, and the squat barracks where Qing banners hung limp. Sentries patrolled the perimeter, their muskets glinting under the moon. Yelka's heart pounded, a mix of fear and fierce determination. She was no longer just the plague doctor's daughter stitching corpses in the bone church. She was the hollow mare, carrying the seed of nations. Kös raised the banner high, and the silk unfurled with a sigh, drinking deep. Moonlight poured into it, illuminating the embroidered dragon in veins of liquid silver. A low hum rose from the ground, the steppe itself responding, bones rattling faintly in their ossuary winds. The sentries froze, then shouted alarms, but it was too late. Yelka spurred her mare forward, Kös at her side, their horses merging into a thunderous charge. She drew her dagger, horsehair-stitched hilt warm in her palm, and let out a cry that echoed the spirit's rage. The banner's light blinded the first soldiers, their eyes widening in terror as shadows peeled from the night to drag them down. Kös's sword sang, cleaving through armor and flesh with brutal precision, his movements a dance of controlled savagery. One guard lunged at Yelka, bayonet thrusting. She twisted, the blade grazing her thigh, drawing a line of fire. But the flower pulsed, and she felt its strength surge through her veins like liquid starlight. Her dagger found his throat, and he crumpled, gurgling. By the time the last echo of gunfire faded, the garrison lay broken, the village free. The villagers emerged cautiously, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear, eyes hollowed by the Empire's endless demands. An elder, his braids silvered with dust, approached Kös, bowing low. "Prince of the Lost Horde," he murmured. "The banner. It glows like the old tales." Kös dismounted, the banner still shimmering in his grip. "It drinks the moon to feed the earth. Call the women with child. The flower wakes what the Qing tried to kill." Yelka slid from her horse, legs unsteady from the ride and the adrenaline's crash. She followed the elder to the central yurt, where cries already pierced the night. Not of pain, but of something miraculous and terrifying. Inside, under flickering oil lamps, 3 women labored, their bellies swollen not just with babes, but with the flower's touch. The first birth came swift. The mother, a sturdy herder named Altansarnai, gasping as the child slid free into the midwife's hands. The babe wailed, strong and furious, but when the woman who tended her lifted it high, the villagers gasped. The infant's eyes were black as fertile soil, fringed with lashes like fern fronds, staring out with an ancient wisdom. "A fern child," the elder whispered, awe threading his voice. "Born of the steppe's revenge." Altansarnai reached for her daughter, tears carving tracks through the grime on her cheeks. But as she cradled the babe, her gaze fell on Yelka, standing in the doorway, the weight of the flower evident in her subtle sway. "You," she said, voice cracking. "You're the bearer, the witch with the bloom inside." The yurt fell silent, all eyes on Yelka. She straightened, meeting the mother's stare. "I'm Yelka Morozova. And yes, it grows in me." Altansarnai's face twisted, hope warring with desperation. "Then cut it out. Please. For the love of Tengri, excise it from your womb before it curses us all. My girl." Her eyes see too much already. They see the dead walking the winds. What if it takes her from me? The other women murmured agreement, their own labors pausing as contractions eased in the banner's glow. One clutched her rounding belly protectively. "The Qing say it's a demon seed. They'll burn us all if they find these children. End it, bearer. Spare the steppe another plague." Yelka's hand drifted to her abdomen where the fern coiled, its petals brushing her insides like a lover's whisper. Cutting it out would mean her death, and perhaps the end of the Oirat dream. But the plea stung, echoing the fears she'd buried since the contract. "It brings life," she said softly, stepping closer. "Your daughters are proof. They'll lead your people back from the ashes." Altansarnai sobbed, rocking her fern-eyed babe. "Life, or a chain. The myths say the flower blooms once, then withers everything around it. Don't let it bloom in you." Kös appeared at the yurt's flap, his presence a shadow that silenced the room. Blood speckled his tunic, but his eyes burned with unyielding fire. "The flower is no curse," he growled. "It's the heart of us, reborn. Honor it, or the steppe honors nothing." The women shrank back, but their pleas lingered in Yelka's ears as she followed Kös out into the night. The village celebrated tentatively, fires lit, mare's milk shared, but the hope felt fragile, laced with the peril of what she'd unleashed. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the steppe in hues of rose and ash. They rode out as the village stirred, the fern children's cries a distant lullaby. But the joy curdled in Yelka's throat. The Qing would come, drawn by the banner's light like wolves to a wound. That night, as they camped in a hollow of wind-sculpted dunes, Kös pulled her from the saddle before their fire could catch. "You carry too much alone," he said, his hands rough yet gentle on her waist. The mother's words. They burrow like steppe ticks. Yelka met his gaze, the firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "They fear what I fear, that I'm dooming us all." He shook his head, fingers tracing the scar on her thigh from the skirmish. "Fear is the Qing's weapon. We forge ours in fire and flesh." His mouth claimed hers then, fierce and claiming, tasting of salt and smoke. Yelka melted into him, the flower blooming hot inside her at his touch. They stripped under the stars, bodies pressing close, skin to skin against the chill wind. "You must learn to ride as one with the horse," Kös murmured against her neck, his breath hot. "Bareback, trusting the rhythm. Like this." He guided her to the ground first, but then lifted her onto his lap as he sat against a saddlebag, his hardness pressing insistent against her core. She gasped as he entered her slowly. The stretch a delicious ache that made the flower unfurl its tendrils of pleasure. "Kös!" "Trust," he commanded, his hands weaving through his own long hair. braiding a loop that he pressed into her palms. "Hold these as reins. Feel me inside you, guiding." Yelka gripped the makeshift reins, the coarse strands biting her skin like a promise. He thrust up gently, setting a rhythm that mirrored a horse's canter. Deep, rolling waves that built with each breath. She rocked with him, her body learning the syncopation, pleasure coiling tighter as the flower responded, its essence mingling with her slick heat. "Now imagine the mare beneath us," he growled, nipping her earlobe. "Her stride is ours. Lean into it." She did, arching back, her breasts brushing his chest as she rode him harder. The reins pulled taut, drawing his head closer, his mouth latching onto her nipple with a suck that sent sparks through her veins. The world narrowed to their union. The slap of skin, the wet glide, the flower's petals teasing her from within like phantom fingers. Ecstasy crested, shattering her with a cry that scattered distant birds. Kös followed, his release flooding her, feeding the bloom. They collapsed together, panting, his hair reins still tangled in her fists. "See?" he whispered, stroking her hair. "Bonded, we survive. The horse, the lover, the flower, all one." But as sleep claimed her, Yelka dreamed of thorns crowning her womb and the steppe echoing with mother's screams. 2 days later, they reached the next village, a forsaken cluster of tents lashed against a dry riverbed. The banner's light had drawn whispers ahead. The people waited, eyes wide with desperate faith. The garrison fell easier this time, the soldiers unnerved by tales of moon ghosts and fern witches. In the birthing tent, 2 more children emerged, their eyes fern-fronded and knowing. The mother's pleas were sharper, hands clutching Yelka's skirts. "Cut it out, before it spreads like plague," one wailed, her newborn mewling at her breast. Yelka knelt, touching the babe's cheek. The child's gaze locked on hers, a flicker of recognition passing between them, like souls entwined across the veil. "She's beautiful," Yelka said, voice steady despite the ache. "She'll ride the winds your ancestors knew." The mother wept, but nodded, the hope winning a fragile victory. That night, under a canopy of stars, Kös taught her again. This time they moved to the horses. He led her to a sturdy mare, the beast calm under his hand. "Mount," he said, his voice husky. "But I come with you." Yelka's pulse raced as she swung bareback onto the horse, the coarse hair warm against her thighs. Kös mounted behind, his body enveloping hers, one arm banding her waist as he slid inside her with a groan. The mare shifted, and Yelka tensed, but his free hand braided another loop of hair, placing it in her grip. "Ride," he urged, hips bucking in time with the horse's first step. They walked the perimeter of camp, the motion translating through their joined bodies, a slow, intimate grind that built friction like a gathering storm. Yelka pulled the reins lightly, guiding both horse and lover, the dual sensations overwhelming. The flower thrummed, petals parting as pleasure mounted, her cries muffled against the wind. Faster now, the mare trotting, Kös's thrusts deepening, his teeth grazing her shoulder. "Feel the bond," he panted. "We're the horde reborn, unbreakable." She came undone as the horse broke into a canter, the world blurring into ecstasy, his release sealing their rhythm. They slowed to a halt, trembling, the steppe vast and watchful around them. Yet peril shadowed their hope. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance that night, Qing scouts drawn by the births. Kös dispatched them silently, but Yelka saw the strain in his eyes, the blood he drank from a hidden flask to stave off the curse. The third village clung to a salt flat, its people hardened by thirst and tribute. The banner's glow pierced the haze, and the fight was fierce, muskets cracking, blades clashing. Yelka took a graze to the arm, but the flower healed it with a whisper of green magic, vines of pleasure stitching the wound. 4 births this time, the tent alive with wails and wonder. The mothers encircled Yelka, Their begs a chorus, "Remove it! Save us from the bloom's hunger!" One, a young widow named Oyuna, pressed a knife into Yelka's hand. "Do it now, for my son. He sees the ghosts in the salt. They pull at him." Yelka's fingers closed around the hilt, temptation flickering. The flower twisted inside, a warning or a plea. Kös entered then, his presence parting the crowd. "She won't," he said flatly, "and neither will you. These children are your future." Oyuna fell to her knees, sobbing. Yelka dropped the knife, pulling the woman into an embrace. "I'll carry it till the end," she vowed, "for all of you." As they rode out at moonrise, the banner fuller, drinking deeper, Yelka felt the flower's growth. A sharpening, a crowning edge. Hope bloomed in the fern eyes left behind, but peril rode with them, the Qing's shadow lengthening across the steppe. In the quiet hours before dawn, Kös drew her close once more. "The lessons build you," he said, braiding his hair into reins once again. "Stronger for what's coming." Their lovemaking was urgent this time, bodies slick with sweat and steppe dust, the reins pulling them into a frenzy of need. She rode him under the fading moon, the flower crowning in waves of bliss, binding them tighter than any contract. But as the first light touched the horizon, a distant horn sounded, the death cavalry closing in. Their path west led to greater trials, brothels and rebellions, sieges and temptations. For now, the moon banner flew, a promise of rebirth amid the bones. Chapter 2, The Brothel Rebellion. The steppe's relentless wind had finally driven them to the fringes of a forgotten trading post, where the air thickened with the scent of jasmine oil and unwashed desperation. Yelka's thighs ached from the bareback rides, each gallop a reminder of Kös's lessons. His body fused to hers, reins of hair pulling her into rhythms that blurred horseflesh and lover. The moon banner, now heavy with absorbed light, was furled tight across Kös's saddle, its silk whispering promises of more villages to free. But the Qing horns had grown too close, their echoes a hound's bay in the night, forcing them toward this shadowed sanctuary. Madame Orlitza's brothel, a den of silk and secrets where rebellion brewed hotter than the bodies entwined within. They approached under cover of dusk, the brothel's lanterns swaying like fireflies trapped in red gauze. The building squatted at the edge of the post, its walls a patchwork of weathered timber and stolen Qing silk, adorned with faded murals of steppe goddesses in throes of ecstasy. Horses were stabled in the rear, ghost-thin and watchful, their eyes reflecting the glow from within. Kös dismounted first, his hand steadying Yelka as she slid down, her boots sinking into the mud churned by countless comings and goings. "Trust no one until Orlitza speaks," Kös murmured, his breath warm against her ear, fingers lingering on her waist. The flower stirred inside her, a subtle uncoiling at his proximity, petals brushing her core like a secret shared. She nodded, dagger hidden in her boot, the weight of the village's fern-eyed children pressing on her mind. Mother's pleas echoed. "Cut it out, spare us the curse." But the births had ignited something fierce in her, a rebellion against the empire's barren grip. The door creaked open before they knocked, revealing a woman whose presence filled the threshold like smoke from an opium pipe. Madame Orlitza was neither young nor frail. Her face was a map of laugh lines etched deep around eyes sharp as flint, her hair a cascade of iron-grey braids threaded with jade beads. She wore a robe of crimson silk that clung to curves earned from years of survival, and her smile was a blade sheathed in honey. "The prince and his flower-bearer," she said, voice a husky purr that cut through the muffled moans from within. "Word travels faster than cavalry on these winds. Come, before Zhao's spies sniff your scent." Inside, the brothel pulsed with life and shadow. Low ceilings draped in faded tapestries trapped the air heavy with musk, sweat, and the sharp tang of fermented mare's milk. Women moved like specters in diaphanous shifts, their laughter a counterpoint to the grunts of patrons, traders, deserters, and unwitting Qing officers seeking forgetfulness in flesh. Tables groaned under platters of smoked meats and bowls of milky kumis, while a zither's wail wove through the haze. Olitsa led them to a back chamber, its walls lined with shelves of vials, poisons, perfumes, and powders that could heal or kill. Kös leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gaze scanning for threats. Yelka sank onto a cushioned divan, the flower's heat flaring as if sensing allies in this web of vice. "The rebellion simmers," Olitsa said, pouring 3 cups of dark liquor that burned like liquid fire. "We smuggle guns under the beds, messages in the folds of our robes. But the maps, those are my masterpiece." She hiked up her robe with casual grace, revealing thighs scarred and inked, faint lines of rivers, mountains, and hidden passes snaking across her skin like veins of rebellion. Yelka's eyes widened, leaning forward. "Tattooed? On there?" Olitsa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Where else? Guards pat us down, but they never look close enough to read. Each girl carries a piece, the steppe's veins, paths to Uremki's underbelly. Tonight we ink a new one for the Hollow Mare's ride west." Kös's jaw tightened, but he nodded approval. "And the guard? The one holding our brothers in the cells below the post?" "That's where you come in, flower girl," Olitsa replied, eyes gleaming. "Pleasure as a weapon. I've seen what you carry, that bloom that twists men to madness. Teach it to blind, and we'll free a dozen Oirat before dawn." Yelka's pulse quickened, the flower's tendrils responding to the challenge, coiling tighter in her womb. Blinding with ecstasy? The thought sent a shiver through her, equal parts revulsion and dark curiosity. Kös's gaze met hers, a silent question, but she straightened. "Show me." Olitsa summoned a girl named Lyra, slender and sharp-eyed, her skin pale as steppe snow. In the chamber's alcove, screened by silk, the madame demonstrated. Lyra lay back on a low table, legs parted, while Olitsa traced the tattoo needle's path. First the map's lines, but then, with oil slick on her fingers, she delved deeper. "It's not just ink," Olitsa explained, her touch precise, circling Lyra's most sensitive pearl. The girl gasped, hips arching as the madame whispered techniques. Pressure points that built waves, breaths timed to unravel control, eyes locked to channel the surge. "When he peaks, force it. Make the light explode behind his lids. Qing eyes are weak to it. Their discipline crumbles like salt." Lyra moaned, her body trembling as climax neared, and Olitsa pressed harder, murmuring, "Now, blind him. See the maps in the dark?" The girl's release hit like a storm, her scream muffled, and in that moment Olitsa nodded to an imaginary guard. He'd see stars, then nothing, enough to slit his throat or slip the keys. Yelka watched, heat flooding her veins, the flower blooming in empathy. It was power, twisted from the Empire's own tools, rape as weapon turned to rebellion's edge. "I'll learn," she said, voice steady. The lesson shifted to her. Olitsa stepped aside, and Kös moved closer, his presence an anchor. But it was Lyra who guided first, hands gentle on Yelka's thighs as she lay exposed. "Breathe with it," the girl said, fingers exploring, teaching the build, the slow spiral, the edge held taut. Yelka's body responded, slick and eager, the flower unfurling petals that amplified every touch. Kös watched, his breathing ragged, until Olitsa pulled him in. "Join, Prince. Your blood calls to hers. Make it sing." He knelt between Yelka's legs, his mouth replacing Lyra's fingers, tongue delving with the precision of a man who knew her secrets. Yelka arched, gripping the table's edge as he coaxed the flower's essence forth, not to milk it fully, but to weaponize its light. "Feel the surge," he growled against her skin, teeth grazing her inner thigh. "When it breaks, direct it. Into his eyes. His soul." His fingers joined his tongue, thrusting in rhythm, building the pressure until Yelka teetered on the brink. The room faded, The tattoo needles buzz a distant hum, as pleasure coiled like a serpent. She shattered, crying out, and in that white-hot bloom, she imagined the god, eyes widening, blinded by the radiant force of her release. The flower pulsed, sending imagined light lancing outward, a weapon forged in ecstasy. Panting, she collapsed, Kös's arms catching her, his hardness pressing against her side like a promise deferred. "Good," Orlitza approved, wiping the needle clean. "Now, ink the map on you. A piece for the mare's path." The needle bit into Yelka's thigh, pain mingling with aftershocks, lines forming a route through the salt flats to Urumqi. Each prick grounded her, turning vulnerability to armor. Hours blurred into preparation. More girls were inked, their thighs a living atlas of escape. Whispers of the plan spread. Seduce the guard at the post's cells, blind him, free the prisoners, then ride with the brothel's hidden cache of rifles. Kös scouted the perimeter, his shadow blending with the night, while Yelka rested, the map's fresh ink itching like a vow. Midnight brought the test. The guard, a hulking Qing sergeant named Huan, was lured with promises of forbidden delights. He lumbered into a private room, uniform stiff with authority, eyes hungry as they raked over Yelka, reclining in silks that barely concealed the new tattoo. "The flower witch," he sneered, unbuckling his belt. "Zhao wants you chained, but I'll sample first." His breath reeked of rice wine, hands rough as he grabbed her wrists. Yelka twisted free, smile seductive, pulling him down. "Let me show you paradise first," she purred, straddling him, her body allure. She ground against his growing arousal, hands guiding his to her breasts, building the tension with practiced slowness. The flower thrummed, feeding her control, as she whispered filth in his ear, promises of depths he'd never plumbed. He groaned, thrusting up, lost in the haze. Yelka positioned herself, taking him deep, the stretch a calculated burn. She rode him with the rhythm Kös had taught, hips rolling like step waves, her fingers circling her own pearl to heighten the build. His eyes locked on hers, glazing with need. "Look at me," she commanded, voice laced with the flower's power. Pleasure crested in her, hot and unrelenting, and she channeled it, eyes boring into his as her body clenched, release exploding outward. Light flared in her vision, and Huan screamed, bucking wildly before going rigid. His eyes rolled back, whites blooming like blind moons, the orgasm's force searing his sight. Yelka slipped free, grabbing his keys from the belt as he thrashed, sightless and babbling. Lyra darted in, slitting his throat with a swift blade, blood pooling dark on the silks. "Free," she whispered, and they moved, unlocking cells below, Oirat rebels emerging like ghosts, armed with pilfered muskets. Chaos erupted in the post as alarms wailed. Gunfire cracked the night, Qing soldiers spilling from barracks. Kös appeared at the brothel's door, sword bloodied, the moon banner unfurled to drink the chaos's light. "To the horses!" he roared, pulling Yelka onto his mount, her thighs slick with ink, sweat, and victory. But amid the fray, a figure on horseback cut through the melee. Colonel Zhao Wuying, his armor gleaming under torchlight, left ear collection pouch swinging at his saddle. His face was a mask of cultured rage, eyes fixed on Yelka like a collector sighting a rare jade. "Yelena Morozova," he called, voice carrying over the din, calm as the executioner's decree. "Stop this folly. Join me, and I'll forge you a crown from the steppes' gold. Childless, yes, but eternal. No more running, no cursed bloom to wither your womb. Be empress, not broodmare." Yelka clung to Kös, the offer slithering through her like poison. A gilded cage, free of the flower's thorns, the mother's pleas, the endless flight. She could stitch plagues in silk holes, speak to corpses without fear of genocide's shadow. But the fern pulsed, rejecting the sterility, and Kös's arm around her waist was iron and fire. "Your empire sows ash," she shouted back, drawing her dagger. "I'll bloom in the ruins, not your barren throne." The words sealed it, rebellion surging through her veins like the flower's sap. Zhao's laugh was bitter, spurring his horse away as rebels harried his flank. "You'll beg for the cage when the petals cut you open." The brothel burned behind them as they fled west, flames licking the sky, a beacon for more to rise. Orlitza's girls rode with them, thighs mapping the way, rifles slung across backs. Yelka leaned into Kös, their bodies sinking in the gallop, the map on her skin a tattoo of choice. In the saddle's rhythm, his hand slipped under her skirt, fingers tracing the ink, then delving higher. "You chose us," he murmured, voice rough with pride and hunger. The flower responded, petals parting as his touch ignited sparks. "Always," she breathed, grinding back the escape's adrenaline fueling need. They rode hard, but in stolen moments, pleasure wove through peril, his fingers thrusting in time with the horse's stride, building her toward another blinding crest. She came with a gasp, lost to the wind, the release a vow, binding them deeper. The steppe unfolded ahead, Urumqi's frost-glass spires a distant gleam. More rebellions awaited, the flower's crown sharpening inside her. But for now, the hollow mare galloped free, thighs inked with paths to dawn. Chapter 3, Frostglass Siege. The steppe's chill deepened as they crested the final ridge, Urumqi's frost-glass palace rising like a jagged tooth from the frozen earth. Towers of translucent ice and polished quartz pierced the slate-grey sky, their surfaces etched with imperial dragons that seemed to writhe in the howling wind. Below, the city sprawled in rigid order, barracks of black stone, markets shuttered against the cold, and the palace's outer walls patrolled by Qing sentries bundled in fur-lined armor, their breaths clouding like ghosts. Yelka's tattooed thighs burned from the endless ride, the inked maps now a roadmap to this heart of empire, but the flower's stirrings inside her drowned out the ache, a restless blooming, petals edging sharper with each league toward confrontation. Kös rode at her side, the moon banner unfurled on a lance borne by Boka, the mute stable boy whose eyes gleamed with fanatic light. Behind them, the hollow mare caravan thundered, 40 wagons drawn by ghost horses, their hooves muffled by snow, carrying Orlitza's rebels. Whores turned warriors, thighs scarred with escape routes, rifles cradled like lovers. Madame Orlitza herself flanked the rear, her crimson robe traded for leather armor, a curved blade at her hip, and a bandolier of bullets across her chest. The brothel's flames had forged them into this, a tide of vengeance crashing against the Qing's frozen bulwark. "The lake lies beneath the palace foundations," Kös said, voice low against the wind's scream, his hand brushing Yelka's as their horses pressed close. "Frozen blood of the drowned Oirat, my kin, poured into the earth when Zhao dammed the rivers. If I drink it, the curse holds. I stay man, not beast. But it's poison, Yelka, deep as the shame that birthed it." She met his gaze, the black of his eyes swallowing the horizon. The flower responded to his nearness, a throb low in her belly, slick heat pooling despite the frost. "Then drink," she whispered, leaning to press her lips to his ear. "For the children we freed, for the wombs we won't let burn. I'll hold you after." His fingers tightened on her reins, a promise in the grip. Boka signaled ahead, the banner dipping like a predator's wing, and the charge began. Rebels whooped, a feral chorus rising over the snow as they surged down the slope toward the palace gates. Qing horns blared in alarm, crossbows twanging from the walls, bolts whistling past like vengeful spirits. The first clash shattered the silence. Yelka's horse reared as a bolt grazed its flank, but Kös was there, sword flashing to cleave the archer's perch. Blood sprayed, steaming on the ice, and she drew her dagger, horsehair-stitched grip familiar from plague nights, plunging it into a sentry's throat as they barreled through. The gates loomed, iron-bound and rune-carved, guarded by a phalanx of spearmen whose pikes formed a glittering wall. Orlitza fired first, her rifle cracking, a guard's helmet exploding in red mist. The rebels followed, a hail of lead chewing through armor, bodies crumpling into the snow. Yelka vaulted from her saddle mid-gallop, rolling to slash at hamstrings, her blade drinking deep as men howled and fell. Kös fought like a tempest, his sword a blur, severing limbs and heads with each swing, the moon banner drinking the spilled life, its silk pulsing brighter. They breached the gates in a frenzy of steel and gunpowder, the palace courtyard, a killing ground of slick ice and trampled banners. Qing reinforcements poured from side arches, lancers on armored steeds, their queues whipping like serpents. But the hollow mares' wagons formed a barricade, rebels leaping to defend with bayonets and bare hands. Yelka pressed forward, breath ragged, the flower's heat a forge in her core, urging her deeper into the fray. "To the undercroft!" Kös roared, spotting a grate half buried in snow near the palace's central spire. He hacked through a knot of soldiers, their screams cut short, and pried the iron bars with blood-slick hands. Yelka covered him, her dagger weaving death, a rebel's bullet whizzing past to fell a captain at her feet. Together they descended the spiral stairs, torchlight flickering on walls veined with frost, the air growing thicker, colder, laced with the metallic tang of old slaughter. The undercroft opened into a vast chamber, its floor a mirror of ice over the frozen lake. Bodies suspended beneath, hundreds, thousands of oirat drowned and encased, faces twisted in eternal agony, limbs tangled like roots in a grave. The lake stretched to the chamber's edges, its surface a flawless sheet reflecting the rebels' torches like stars in a blood-red sky. Zhao's engineers had built the palace atop this tomb, glass floors in the halls above, allowing the governor to sip tea while gazing at the empire's drowned trophies. Kös staggered at the sight, knees buckling, a guttural sound ripping from his throat. The curse clawed at him. The battle's rage threatening to unleash the beast, fangs lengthening, eyes glazing feral. "The blood," he gasped, clawing at the ice. "Must drink now, or I'll tear us all." Yelka dropped beside him, torch sputtering in her fist, heart pounding. Orlitza and a handful of rebels fanned out, securing the chamber's arches against pursuing Qing. "Do it," Yelka urged, her free hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor of his restraint. The flower sensed his peril, tendrils extending in sympathy, a slick warmth spreading through her veins. He smashed the ice with his sword hilt, cracked spiderwebbing outward, then drove the blade deep. Shards exploded, revealing the crimson depths below. Blood congealed over centuries, thick as syrup flecked with bone and hair. Kös plunged his face in without hesitation, gulping the frozen slush, chunks cracking between his teeth. It coated his beard, dripped from his chin, the metallic reek filling the air like a charnel house. Yelka watched, transfixed, as he drank. Deep, desperate swallows that bulged his throat, the curse receding with each pull. His body convulsed, veins blackening under skin, but humanity flickered back. Eyes clearing, fangs retracting. The lake's power surged through him, ancestors' screams echoing in his blood, binding him to the drowned. He surfaced gasping, face smeared scarlet, and seized Yelka's wrist, pulling her close. "Tastes of home," he rasped, lips brushing hers. The blood's warmth a stark contrast to the chill. She kissed him fiercely, tasting the iron tang, the flower's petals unfurling in response, arousal coiling hot and urgent. Even here, amid death's vault, their bond demanded satiation, a deadly dance to affirm life. Gunfire echoed from above, Qing forces breaching the undercroft stairs. Orlitza barked orders, her rifle barking back, rebels forming a ragged line. "They're coming! Hold the arches!" A bullet ricocheted, grazing a girl's arm, her curse swallowed by the fray. Kös rose, renewed, sword in hand, Yelka at his side. They charged the intruders, a whirlwind of blade and dagger, bodies piling at their feet. Blood slicked the ice, melting patches that revealed more drowned faces staring up. The siege spilled into the chamber, rebels clashing with Qing in a melee of grunts and clashes, the lake cracking further under the weight of the fallen. Through the chaos, a voice cut clear, commanding, laced with silk-wrapped venom. Colonel Zhao Wuying emerged from a side passage, flanked by elite guards in lacquered armor, his face pale and composed amid the slaughter. His left ear pouch hung heavy at his belt, swollen with fresh trophies, and his saber gleamed with the promise of precision cuts. "The flower witch and her mongrel prince," Zhao sneered, eyes locking on Yelka as he parried a rebel's thrust. "You defile my palace with this rabble. Surrender the bloom, and I'll spare your companions. Rule beside me, Yelena, Empress of Ashes, womb untouched by thorns." Yelka laughed, wild and breathless, dodging a guard's swing to sink her dagger into his side. The flower's heat built, petals sharpening, a pressure mounting like childbirth's edge. "Your offers rot like your dams," she spat, lunging at him. Zhao sidestepped gracefully, his saber nicking her arm, blood welling hot. Kös barreled into the guards, sword-cleaving armor, buying her space. Orlitza joined the press, her blade flashing to disembowel a foe, blood arcing to splatter the ice. "For the thighs that mapped your fall," she cried, a hoarse defiance turned war cry. The battle raged, rebels thinning but fierce, Qing pressing with disciplined fury. Zhao circled Yelka, their duel a deadly waltz, her dagger frantic, his saber elegant, each clash ringing like fate's hammer. A guard's pike grazed Kös's back, tearing cloth and flesh, but he roared, drinking the wound's spill from his own hand, the lake's blood fueling his frenzy. Yelka felt it then. The crowning. Deep inside, the fern-flower thrust upward, petals unfurling like sabers slicing her from within. Pain lanced through her core, sharp as birthing blades, mingled with ecstasy's fire. She gasped, staggering, hand pressing her abdomen where heat bloomed outward, slickness soaking her thighs. "Yelka!" Kös whirled, eyes widening in horror and hunger as a petal's edge pricked through her skin, a thin line of blood tracing her belly. The flower crowned, not fully bloomed, but piercing, its mythic power surging, resurrection's promise, annihilation's threat. Zhao paused, fascination twisting his features. "It begins. The shame flowers. Yield it to me, witch, or let it carve you hollow." She straightened through the agony, the flower's light pulsing in her veins, sharpening her vision, her strikes. With a cry, she lunged, dagger finding Zhao's guard, then glancing his saber. Kös reached her, arm wrapping her waist, his body shielding as they backed toward the lake's edge. Rebels faltered, Qing closing in, but the flower's crowning ignited something cosmic. The air thickening, drowned faces beneath the ice stirring, eyes flickering open in the crimson depths. Orlitza fell back, wounded but snarling, covering their retreat. "Go! Bloom for us!" Kös pulled Yelka down behind a shattered pillar, the battle's din a roar in their ears. His hands tore at her clothes, urgent, the curse and crown demanding union. "Let me ease it," he growled, mouth on her neck, fingers delving between her legs where petals met flesh. She arched into him, pain twisting to pleasure. The crowning's petals parting under his touch, slick with her essence and blood. He thrust into her hard and claiming, each movement coaxing the flower deeper, its edges grazing but not severing. A deadly bloom fed by their joining. She bit his shoulder, muffling screams as waves crashed, the lake cracking wider, ancestors' whispers rising like steam. Zhao's voice echoed, closer now. "You can't outrun the veil." But in that moment, entwined on the blood ice, Yelka felt the world thin, steppe spirits watching, the hollow mare's ghosts cheering. The flower crowned fully, petals sharp as vows, binding her to Kös, to the reborn nation stirring in her veins. The siege raged on, but their rebellion had pierced the frost. Jurumki's heart bleeding, the empire's end blooming in her womb.